The invention of the radio and television completely changed the way in which the world would be able to access information and knowledge. Before the 1920s, most information and knowledge came from printed materials. In its time, the newspaper was seen as an extremely powerful medium that could pass along information to large audiences at one time. However, radio and television far surpassed the newspaper's ability to transfer information. Both mediums allowed information to become increasingly instantaneous and could reach a larger audience as the geographical constraints were limited. In the 1880s, when Henry Hertz first discovered he could send and receive electronic waves wirelessly, he probably never realized the profound impact this discovery would have on society years later. Many never thought it would be possible to actually communicate using signals over airwaves. Like Hertz, many scientists and inventors contributed to the invention of the radio. However, it wasn't until a decade later that Marconi, an Italian inventor, accidentally discovered that grounded antennas could send signals such as the signals used for Morse code over long distances. In 1900, Reginald Fessenden invented a way to transmit a voice message over radio by altering the intensity of the waves. The ability to transmit voice and music over radio changed the way in which society would communicate and access information and knowledge from this point on. In his article, How the Radio Changed Everything, Guy Gugliotta suggests that the radio had paved the way for more advanced communicative technologies such as the television and cellular phones. Radio and television harnessed the potential to reach almost anyone, anywhere. For the first time in a long time, listeners did not need to be literate. Those who were illiterate were able to access information in a new way and were no longer bound by the medium of print. As such, it had the ability to bring people together from different regions and social classes, and ultimately help to create a sense of unity and cohesiveness. In its early years, the radio was used as a tool to provide Canadians with the information and entertainment that reflected Canadian culture. However, the Canadian radio networks had tough competition as they had to compete with the well-developed neighboring American networks. For fear of cultural assimilation, the Canadian government created the National Broadcasting Company. The goal of this new organization was to foster a national spirit and interpret national citizenship. It is at this point in time when radio began to reflect cultural aspects of society that transcended boundaries nationwide. Many historians say that radio helped to create and solidify national identity. In Canada, the first commercial radio broadcast took place in 1922. At this point in time, most people did not own their own radio at home. However, by 1930, almost 40% of the population had a radio in their home. This number more than doubled 10 years later. By 1940, over 80% of the population had access to a radio. Initially, stations played live musical performances, and eventually other programs began to emerge, including dramas, talk shows, comedies, and educational programs. After the World War, the news became an integral part of radio broadcasting. The 1930s was known as the golden age of radio. Although the world was experiencing a depression, many people still found a way to purchase a radio for their household. Many felt that the initial cost of the radio was justifiable as it would provide hours of inexpensive entertainment afterwards. Radio became an important part of society and culture as it helped to link the country together and inform citizens who lived in the most remote of areas. Some of the popular radio programs aired in the 1930s included The Happy Gang, Femina, regional farm broadcasts, and a variety of sports programs. Foster Hewitt became a popular figure in many households. He was the commentator for Hockey Night in Canada, which aired every Saturday night. From this point on, those who were unable to physically or financially attend an NHL game could now experience the games in real time without having to be there. Radio programs targeted all walks of life. Specific programs were created especially for kids, men and women, and those representing diverse cultural, economic, and social backgrounds. Separate French-speaking networks were also established to accommodate those whose first language was primarily French. As such, the radio became a way for citizens to engage in politics and help to encourage civic participation in society. Governments, such as Teddy Roosevelt and his fireside chats, used the radio as a tool to convey a variety of political messages. During the Second World War, CBC Radio Canada kept the home front informed by relaying war reports sent from Europe and used radio broadcasting to increase funding for the war. The 1940s saw a shift away from the golden age of radio. Television began to emerge and offered something that radio was unable to provide. To a certain degree, radio could be compared to reading, as it required the person engaging with the material to use imagery to help understand the information being passed along. The introduction of television allowed citizen viewers to visually experience information, knowledge, and entertainment. Through visual and auditory stimuli, viewers were now able to experience the world differently. Marshall McLuhan explains that the phenomena associated with the rise of television was one that made the world smaller. McLuhan asserts that television transformed society into an interconnected tribe he calls a global village. Through television, information became more accessible than ever. As television became more and more popularized, the world of radio saw a huge change in what it would broadcast. Many of the dramas and comedy shows that initially aired on radio were migrating over to televised broadcasting. As the program shifted, so did the celebrities. As a result, radio programming needed to adjust to these changes and reduce the entertainment portion of broadcasting and focus more so on music, news, and call-in talk shows. Television emerged into a powerful medium for both formal and informal learning. Many educators began to incorporate video and television into their lessons and unit plans. The ability to visualize and fully experience information added a lifelike quality to the learning environment. McLuhan explains that with the touch of a button, someone could experience the world and ultimately change the way people thought. Radio and television and its impact on culture, society, and communication was not always seen on a positive note. These methods of communication are powerful tools that allow information and messages to be passed quickly over a long distance. News, music, and entertainment was accessible to the masses and had a powerful ability to cross over socioeconomic, political, ethnic, and cultural lines. As such, many worried that the type of content that was accessible to anyone at any given time would create citizens that would be less involved in civic duties. A journalist of the 1930s, Anne O'Hare McCormick, asserted that listening to the radio was a passive experience. However, McCormick also acknowledged that radio was the first mass medium that increased inclusiveness by linking regions from all over the country and providing instant information pertaining to a wide variety of events. In 1960, McLuhan acknowledged the major transformation from a print-based culture to a culture where oral communication became an integral part of communication. Both radio and television helped to create a society that relied heavily on secondary orality for knowledge acquisition. Vast amounts of information was made available via radio and television, and those engaging with radio and television no longer needed to be literate in order to understand and comprehend the content being presented. Radio and television changed the way in which people experience the world. The acquisition of knowledge evolved from being an individualized activity to one that resembles a shared communal experience. One could probably conclude that the current shift in educational practices may be directly related to the shift that McLuhan refers to in the 1960s. The education system is beginning to embrace collaborative learning environments that incorporate a variety of mediums when presenting content. It is no longer considered effective to solely present printed material in a unit or lesson. Especially in the digital age, many students benefit from a learning environment that provides a variety of sources of information, especially those that are both oral and visual in nature.